this man brought 100 million niggas over here. When this dummy didn't know how to navigate the seas, and he thought the world was flat. Each trip takes 30 days. Let's say he put 300 slaves on a ship. You do the math. 300 slaves, 30-day trip. How many slaves can he get over here? You was already here when this nigga arrived. You been here in North America.
Check this out, y'all. This is a map from 1669. As you can see up here, Virginia and Florida, right? Let's see what kind of map this is. This is the map of the West Indies. Let me zoom in for you. So as y'all can see, Florida and Virginia was a part of the West Indies. We are all, majority of us are West Indian. We got Chesapeake Bay, that says our Powhatan, and we got Port-au-Prince of Haiti. We got Puerto Rico. I'm assuming that's Turks and Caicos. And we got the Yucatan. Now, I'm about to show y'all, like I said, we didn't come from no Africa. We were here, and we were Indians of the West, as you can see, and we call it that today, to this day, West Indies. First of all, shout out to Monty Muse, because he dropped his book in his last video, but this book proved my point in this video. Negro and the Negroid in the New World. The following is an approximately correct summary of the numbers and distribution of the Negroes and Negroids in the New World at the close of 1909. I don't see no African countries. What they're saying is they took us from down here and put us up here in the New World, United States. We did not all come from Africa. Peace and love.
So I say Native Americans included non-combatants who surrendered during King Philip War. We know King Philip War was in 1660 something, because the first Pequot War was in 1637. They say to avoid enslavement, who were enslaved at nearly the same rate as captured combatant. Research show Native American slavery is a piece of history of slavery that has been grossed over, says Linford D. Fisher, associate professor at History of Brown University. Between 1492 and 1880, between 2 and 5.5 million Native Americans were enslaved in the Americas. An additional, now here they go with this, they sent an additional 12.5 million African slaves. All right, but we're going to deal with that right there. All right, we're going to come back to that. Don't even worry about that. I got something for that. They say while natives have been forced into slavery and servitude as early as 1636. Remember, it wasn't 1636 because Squanto was taken to Europe in 1614. Okay, so remember that. And also, we already know what Columbus and them did when they came. All right, so it was not until King Philip War that natives were enslaved in large numbers. Fisher writes in the studies in 1675 and 1676, war-pitted Native Americans leader King Philip, also known as Metacon, which we already discussed him, but we're going to go into just the former perspective, and his allies against the English colonial settlers. During the war, New England colonies routinely shipped Native Americans as slaves to Barbados, Bermuda, and Jamaica. So there you have it. Now this one say Jamaica. The other one don't say Jamaica. That's why I like to cross-reference these articles. The other, it says Barbados and Bermuda. So properly process that. So it was people that was taken from Massachusetts and sent to Barbados and Bermuda. And they telling you that it was almost 2 to 5.5 million people that was enslaved. And they telling you just that in that region of Massachusetts. That ain't got nothing to do with the other states or what they call the southern states, which would be Virginia, the Carolinas, which Georgia is part of the Carolinas, and so forth. All right. So it said, now look, it says during the war, New England colonies routinely shipped Native American. Now understand this. Let me clarify this, right? Because I don't want people to get confused. Look and see when the English took over the Caribbean, because remember the Spanish had the Caribbean first. Okay, the English took over the Caribbean around like 1630 something. Okay, and this is when you get into the Maroons and all that other stuff. But what I'm telling you is that when they telling you the English wasn't shipping people to Spain, because the English and the Anglos and the Spanish and the other Catholic European countries was warring against them. So we know that they was not even intimate. They was not even having negotiations or talking like that, because they was warring one another. So the English, which was the Anglo side or the northern European people, or whatever you want to call them, or whatever. They was warring with the Portuguese, France, and Spain, okay? So when you see right here, when it says Jamaica and the Azores, now I don't even know what the fuck the Azores is, but I'll look this up later on. Matter of fact, man, let me see something. Let me just pull this up real quick. Portugal. Okay, the Azores is Portugal. Alright, so boom. Alright, the island. Alright, boom. So we already know what that is. Alright, so let's go back here. Alright, so the Azores, Spain, and Tanzania is saying North Africa. Alright, so now they telling you, during the war, New England colonies routinely shipped Native Americans as slaves to Barbados and Jamaica, the Azores, which we can say was Portugal, Spain, Tanzania, and North Africa, says Fisher. Okay, now, like I said, don't quote him on that, because we know that England was not even fucking with Spain or the Portugal. So we know that they was not shipping people to Spain or Portugal. They telling you this from a whole story. See, from a micro point of the European slavery, the English really didn't get into slavery until late, because that wasn't their premise. They came here for the land. The Spain and Portugal and France, they wanted land, but they wanted more of the resources that was here to take back to Portugal, Spain, and France. All right, so for the English to ship somebody to Portugal and Spain when they was warring with them, because look, check this out. Look at this, and I'm gonna show y'all something. Check this out. I think I spelled that wrong, but fuck it. Now check this out. Alright. So the Anglo-Spanish Wars. Now you see this. Now it's a couple of them. Now this one right here is from 1796 until 1802, which if we go back here, we'll see that they was warring earlier than that. They was warring from 1585 to 1604. Alright. And you see other, like, it's a couple, they was warring out the whole time. I don't really feel like pulling that up because that ain't part of what I'm doing, but you look it up. Alright, so we're gonna go down. So they say, while Africans who were enslaved did not know where they would be taken, Native Americans understood that they could be sent to the Caribbean plantations and face extremely harsh treatment far from their homes and communities. According to the study, fear of this fate spurred some Native Americans to pledge to fight to death, while others surrendered, hoping to avoid being sent overseas. The study found Fisher's studies appeared in the Journal of Eno History, whatever, Eno, that's how I'm gonna pronounce it, Eno History, all right? It's a documentation of Native Americans enslaved show up in the colonies, correspondence, shipping records, court cases, town records, colonial government orders, and petitions from colonists and the British government, okay? It's a even contemporary official history of the wars all point to the same thing. Indians were enslaved in masses and either distributed locally or sent overseas to various destinations. Fisher writes in the study, studying Native slavery have opened up in recent years. Fisher says, with award-winning books published in 2002, 2003, highlighting the systematic Native Indigenous enslavement. See, now look, when these Europeans are the ones that's telling these stories, they putting these mongoloid faces on the experience, when these mongoloids ain't have shit to do with this. Okay, we already know it, and this is still in Massachusetts. I don't have to pull up the Pequot tribe, modern day Pequot tribe today, and show you that these people are still black to this day. Okay, so understand that. All right, so it's saying, even with the English colonies, Fisher's studies on those who surrendered in King Philip War look at what factors contributed to native slavery. The impact of enslavement had Native Americans for generations surrender or resist. Okay, say Fisher examines the short and long-term effect of native slavery in his studies, noting that during the war, the widespread fear of being sold overseas as slaves was used by Philip allied Native Americans as a tool to recruit natives to the other side. They say other Native Americans surrender. Fisher writes either in response to the epic is a inducement by the English offering mercy, or because they hoped that doing so would be understood as a statement of neutrality. They say these surrenders could be individual families, large bands, and entire communities. Fisher says. It says some Native Americans often offered their services to English in war, like the Awahawks, the female chief of the Confederate. Look at this right here. Look at this shit right here. Hold up. Look at this shit right here. The females of the Confederate Sakanat. Now, hold up, man. Hold the fuck up. Hold up. That word look familiar right there. Okay? That word looks so fucking familiar. Okay? What is the fucking female, segment? What? No. I'm sorry. What is the female warrior for the Egyptians? The lady. This word right here look familiar. It's Sakanat. The Sikanat Indians pledged support on other conditions. Now look, it said the female chief of the Confederate Sikanat Indians who pledged support on the condition of the Sikanat men, women, and children would not be killed or sent out the country as slaves. Now look, remember, these tribes right here are the tribes that was allowed to be free men eventually. Okay? Now it said was not sent out of the country as slaves, according to the study. It say especially near the war. Now they basically did anything the Europeans did, even mixed with them and let them claim that they was fucking Indians. Now this is the shit that was going on, especially near the end of the war. Fisher Wright, the natives surrendered in large numbers. And now look, check this out, man. Let me hold up. All right, so them Native Americans that surrendered in large numbers, what do you think happened to them? What do you think happened to them? Some of them, they probably allowed them to keep their culture, but for the most part, a lot of them lost their culture. You understand what I'm saying? They said they surrendered in large numbers. Now, I just read at the top, it said 2.2 to 5 million. Now, that's just an estimate on his behalf. That ain't got nothing to do with what was going on in the other fucking states. This is only in Massachusetts. This is only in Massachusetts. All right, so it says especially near the wars in Fisher writes, natives surrender in large numbers in direct response to the promise of leniency. To say, but leniency had not consent practical had no consent practical meaning. All right. So it say English authorities focus first on disarming natives, either by selling guns, turn in by surrendering, or prohibiting them from bearing arms. It say Fisher writes, English communities objected to letting natives who surrendered simply go free, and housing and feeding them was complicated, so captives and surrendered natives were simply sold into slavery, both overseas and within New England, and forced into servitude in limited terms within English households. Okay, y'all. Okay. It say in addition, now look. Check this out. Let me see something real quick. Let me see something. Why I got this shit up here, okay? Let me see. Where we at? Alright, where we at? South Atlantic. Alright, let me go to Massachusetts real quick. Kentucky. Oh, it should be coming up right here. Alright, hold up. I think this is it right here. It's Maryland. Hold up. It should be right under Maryland. Alright, so let me see something real quick. Massachusetts, bam. Alright, so 1790 right here. Let's look at this number right here. 1790. You guys are all familiar with this. We got total population, white, black. Okay. Now this is only in Massachusetts itself, right? This is in Massachusetts, alright? So, alright, so you see right here American Indians and Pacific Islanders, right? Now you do see them on the census, but you don't see them until 1860. Now look, in 1860, there was only 32 so-called Indians, right? And you didn't see no Asians open, but you see them jump up to 1870. Boom, by 1890, there's 400, all right? Now check this out. You go up, it goes up, it goes up. All right, so boom. But white and black. Let's look at the white and black. Now, I just told you. Now, let me go back. Let me just go back, all right? Now, you see where we at. It says New Englanders. Motivation for enslaving Native Americans, including making money and clearing lands for colonists to claim. Fisher writes, it was also easier to remove Native Americans from regions than to sell them local and risk having Native Americans run away to find refuge. Fisher also argued that there was a ideological component to enslaving Native Americans. Among colonists, there was a presumption involving the innate inferior of natives. Okay, now he says there was a proto-racial notion of European superiority. Okay, so let me read that again. This coming from a European. Okay, there was a proto-racial notion of European superiority plus the appetite for the land, he says. If you look at the history of the colony, slavery happened almost right away. Okay? Now, it's not telling you that it happened and they was bringing people. They telling you they enslaved the people. And this is, think about it. Okay? This article is very crucial. How many Indian slaves was here? How many was shipped out? And so forth and so forth. All right? So, we're going to go through this. Let's read it.
I'm just going to read it and I'll show it to you. Beyond the Rocky Mountains were the Indian nations of the plains, the great family of the Shoshones, the Salish, the Klamaths, and the Californians. On the Pacific slope, farther southward, dwelt in former times the famous races of Aztecs and Toltecs. These were the most civilized of the primitive Indian nations. See, they can't even front all that, all those palaces they found in Mexico. They can't even front on that in Peru. These were the most civilized of the primitive Indian nations, but at the same time, see, they got to do that, but then they got to dish you because they got to give it. This is how they operate. They build you up, but then they enjoy cutting you down even more, man. These were the most civilized of the primitive Indian tribes, but at the same time, among the most feeble. The best builders in wood and stone. Again, they can't front on the palaces, on the intellect, but then they're going to call you weak. But the least warlike of any of the Aborigines. Really? The Aztecs were the least warlike of any Aborigines? Then we just read how the Mayans and Aztecs kicked the Spaniards out in 1638, sent them running and packing. And they never taught us in history that these Aztecs and Mayans kicked out the Spaniards in 1638. Then after that, who do you have coming here? You know, the Portuguese, the English, the French. And what did they bring? Disease, because they said, we ain't going into them jungles. That's how the Mayans and them fought. You know what I'm saying? They came out, they scrapped, and they retreated back in the jungles and picked everybody off. When the armies came in, they got lost. They didn't know where they were disoriented. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's that's the goal of war. That's why we were winning that until people started doing treaties. And they say, man, if it wasn't for the treaties, man, our numbers were being depleted. So that's why I'm on the treaties, man. And how can you, come on, we got to keep it real right now, or else we ain't going to get nowhere. We go through a similar situation right now. We are already invaded, but let's say your little bitty hood, your little suburb gets invaded. All right, you get invaded in Inglewood, or you get invaded in Harlem or Chicago. You get invaded. You already are, but you know what I'm saying. And then you got to, fight, you and your family or your block or your hood got to fight the best way you can, right? Because some foreign entity is invading your native entity, right? And let's say, there's two, let's say we talking gangs, right? So there's two gangs, and one of them gangs does a treaty with the invaders. Does that make you stronger or weaker? So if we can't front on you, can't front on it. That gang might say all day, hey man, I had to look out for my people, man, for my heritage, for Moab, for the Moabites. Whose land is this? It belongs to Aya. Who are his children? You. It's very simple. So again, it says the Aztecs and Toltecs, all right? So these were the most civilized of the primitive Indian tribes, but at the same time, among the most feeble, the best builders in wood and stone, but the least warlike of any of the Aborigines. Such is a brief sketch of the distribution of the copper-colored race in the New World. The territorial position of the various nations and tribes will be easily understood from an examination of the accompanying maps. So we're going to look at this map, a couple of these maps. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna drop a couple of these things, man. We'll get out of here.
Talking about the conquest, but he didn't, censor himself, and he lets it all out in his book. A lot of the cruelties and what really was going on here, right? So we're going to page 133, and let me just zoom in. And he says, without going into detail and merely to give a general idea, even if we do not feel entirely justified in rounding off figures when it is a question of human lives, it will be recalled that in the 1500, the world population is approximately 400 million, of whom 80 million inhabit the Americas. By the middle of the 16th century, out of these 80 million, there remain 10. So 10 million. Or limiting ourselves to Mexico, on the eve of the conquest, its population is about 25 million. In 1600, it is 1 million. If the word genocide has ever been applied to a situation with some accuracy, this is here the case. So he's letting you know, if you really do the research and the study and you're talking about keeping track of genocides and Holocaust, right? If you really did the research, if the word genocide has ever been applied to a situation with some accuracy, and we're talking about the conquest of the Americas, the invasion, Papa Bull, 1452, this is here the case. It constitutes a record not only in relative terms, a destruction on the order of 90% or more, but also in absolute terms, since we are speaking of a population diminution estimated at 70 million human lives. 70 million estimated. None of the great massacres of the 20th century can be compared to this hecatomb. Alright, none. Letting you know right now, doesn't matter how many people take this as offense, you can't compare what happened to the ancestors here in the Americas. Can't compare any massacre.
When we take a closer look at the transatlantic slave trade database, it appears that the vessels with the most slaves were shipped between different destinations in the Americas rather than from the continent of Africa to America. According to the Intra-American Slave Trade Database, in the year 1700, a ship captained by Charles Duval shipped 308 slaves from an unspecified location in the Americas to Cartagena, Colombia. In 1760, Thomas Lorraine shipped over 300 slaves on the vessel named Viper in 2 trips to Portobello, Panama. In 1786, an unnamed ship transferred 170 slaves from an unspecified location in the Americas to New Orleans. From this examination, it is clear to see that there was a well-ingrained practice of capturing groups of indigenous people from different territories in the Americas and displacing them in foreign enclaves. Some of these foreign ports in which the people were delivered to be sold were in cities such as, most popularly, Charleston, South Carolina, a major slave trading hub in the Old South, formerly known as Charlestown, named after King Charles II of England. Other trafficking hubs include Savannah, Georgia, another southern city whose entire history and economy was built off the slave trade. Also, cities like New Orleans, an area colonized by the French, was populated with Indians who had been shipped from other areas of the Americas. Many of these people were forcibly displaced from areas in Canada and New England known as Acadia, and once becoming slaves under French rule, the offspring of an Indian and Frenchman became known as a Cajun. Throughout this era of human trafficking, original locations from which people were being shipped had been hidden to furthermore geographically alienate them from possibly finding a way to orientate their locations. This was meant to confuse the captives. Many people were taken from the Caribbean islands of Antigua and then transferred to the mainland, as well as people being shipped from island to island, as in the case with General Lincoln, a vessel that in 1799 delivered 50 slaves from Antigua to Havana. The practice of transferring American Indian captives and placing them in unfamiliar lands on the same continent was well documented, but suspiciously overlooked by modern historians.
So now I want to read from, it's like the first page of this article. I was only able to find the first page, but it's very good. So I just want to show you. It's from Slavery and Abolition, a Journal of Slave and Post-Slave Studies. This is from volume 15, issue number 2, 1994. And the name of the article is called Colonization and Slavery in Central America. All right, and this is written by Nigel Boland. So it says here, in the development of the Atlantic world after 1492, Central America was always a peripheral, as it remains today. Yet it is precisely the peripheral nature of its relationship to this emerging world that is the key to understanding the particular patterns of colonization and varieties of slavery that existed in the 3 centuries following the conquest. The relationship between colonization and slavery in Central America from the early 16th century to the mid-19th century was affected by the fact that the region remained throughout this period at the periphery of the Spanish and British empires. The demand for labor in the early Spanish settlements of Hispaniola, Cuba, Panama, and Peru resulted in a large-scale Indian slave trade in Central America in the second quarter of the 16th century. Again, because of the demand of labor, what was happening in Hispaniola? Again, let's get grounded. Because of what they were doing, enslaving and killing by the seas and putting the Indians to work so much, they were dying by the millions. They were dying by the millions in Hispaniola. All right, almost 7 million died in Hispaniola. So what did they have to do? They tell us in textbooks that they had to bring in Africans to replace the Indians that basically perished, almost became extinct in Hispaniola. But as it says here, because of the demand for labor in the early Spanish settlements of Hispaniola, right, in Cuba, not just there, in Panama as well, and Peru, resulted in large-scale Indian slave trade in Central America in the second quarter of the 16th century. So they were grabbing all these indigenous people from Central America to fill the demand for slave labor in those islands and those parts of their colonies like Panama and Peru. Indeed, the first colonial economy of the region was based on slave trading. Again, and the first colonial economy of the region was based on slave trading, supported by the colonial officials themselves. This odious commerce, more accurately conceived as looting than as trade, remained the principal colonial economic activity until the decline in population reduced the supply. The export of as many as 500,000 enslaved Indians prior to 1550 contributed to the rapid and severe depopulation of Central America in the 16th century. Again, the export, listen to this, my people, please. The export of as many as 500,000 enslaved Indians prior to 1550. When did the so-called transatlantic slave trade start? When did it supposedly begin? There was already 500,000 people taken from Central America, exported. Where? How? In ships, right? Or did they teleport? Or did they have planes? In ships. Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28.
So whatever the acronym is, UNESCO, describes the transatlantic slave trade as the biggest deportation in the history.
As the biggest deportation in the history. As the biggest deportation in the history.
Now they telling you the biggest deportation in the history because they're telling you they took people from here. Okay, they say the United Nations estimate between 25 to 30 million people was torn from their homes, deported from North America, and sold as slaves. Now check that shit out. Now listen to that. Listen to what they just said. Now look, it said the UNESCO describes the transatlantic slave trade as the biggest deportation in history. Now look, check this out. Let's look up what the word deportation means. So, I mean, D means under, portation means to be transported. Now look. Check it out. Let's see. Alright, computer, come on, let's get this shit done. Alright, so it say deport. Let me see. Alright, say behave. It say, alright, so it say to behave. Now listen to this shit, y'all. Check this out. Deport, late 15th century, to behave, from Old French deporters, behave, deport. Also a wide range of meanings of Old French, such as be patient, take one, sexual pleasure, amuse, entertainment, remain, delay, console. Alright, but we're going to look at this word, behave, okay? Deport, banish. It's a carry off, transport, banish, exile. From D, it's a in its sense of, off, away, partake, to carry. They say, so if they're telling you right here, see, they're telling you right here in their own fucking sense. It's saying the transatlantic slave trade is the biggest deportation in history. Now, what did we read right here? What did we read when we was right here? What did we read right here? Now, they told you it was millions. They telling you right here it was tens of millions of American Indians who disappeared after 1492. Million, and they say many thousands. They just told you 25 million, okay, was deported. So they didn't say deported from Africa. They said deported from America. So they already slipped up. They slipped up in that article, okay? So were sent to Europe and Africa. All right, so boom. So, all right, so it says 25 to 30 million people was torn from their home, deported to North America, and sold as slaves. Now they saying deported to North America. They saying so that's say many died aboard the ships. Now check this out. These people, all right, so this is what they saying. So okay, they brought Africans here, okay, took them to the Caribbean. But the people, they don't know where them people came from in the Caribbean because they didn't say that they brought nobody there. They said that the people was already there because they was already away from the Spanish. When the English took over the land, they came in contact with them. They started warring with them again. They don't know where they from because they didn't bring them there. They didn't bring them there. Obviously, anybody who's reading this will know. They obviously didn't bring them there. If they said, look, check this out. So, according to one who used their brain, it say the Maroons were escaped slaves. They ran away from their Spanish-owned plantations, okay? When the British took the Caribbean island of Jamaica from the Spain, the word maroon come from the Spanish word Seminole. It say which meant mountainous. It say they fled to the mountainous areas of Jamaica where it was difficult for their owners to follow and catch them and form independent communities as free men and women. Okay, so now they're gonna tell you as more slaves were imported from Africa. No, they was bringing the Indians from Nova Scotia and the different parts of the coast to the Caribbean. So we already can prove that. We already can prove that. How can we prove that? Let's prove it right here. Check this out. Real quick. All right. And go back into the research again.
Again, we're still in the book Indian Slavery in Colonial Times Within the Present Limits of the United States by Almond Wheeler Lauber, PhD. Again, this is Studies in History, Economics, and Public Law, edited by the Faculty of Political Science of Columbia. The chief, though not the earliest, source of Indian slaves, so the chief source of Indian slaves among the French was that of captives taken in war with the Indian tribes. For many years after the coming of the French to Louisiana, they and the Natchez Indians lived in friendly intercourse. Minor Indian troubles in 1711 and 1715 resulted in the enslavement and transportation of certain Indians to Cape Francois on the island of Haiti. All right, so where are these Indians? The descendants of these Indians in Haiti. All right, we know who's there. All right, the hostilities begun with the Natchez Indians in 1715 continued intermittently until 1740. In 1730, because of ill treatment by M. du Chapard, governor of Fort Rosali, who wished the site of a Natchez village on which to build a town, and because of other abuses, the Natchez rose against the French and massacred over 200 of them. All right, so the Natchez weren't having it. They were trying to take their land, everything away from them. Right, so they were not having it, and they killed over 200 of them. It says here. Continuing, Governor Perrier formed an army and advanced against them in their fort. The Natchez offered to leave the place if their lives were spared. So they decided, all right, they're going to kill us, so let's just give them the land so we can survive. Their offer was accepted, but they were detained as prisoners. So even though they accepted their offer, they still detained them as prisoners. All but 20 who escaped. So all of them became prisoners. We're talking about the whole Natchez Nation Indians, right? Including their great son, the little son, and several of the principal war chiefs were captured and carried to New Orleans. All right, you hear this, right? The women and children were retained as slaves on the plantations. Who? The Natchez, not Africans, were retained as slaves on the plantations.
All right, so let's go all the way down to 1634, 1621, around that time. All right. Now remember, this say 1611. Say this is something though. Say former Dutch lawyer Block explored Manhattan Island. It's saying the ship Tiger say he returned. All right, so Dutch. So remember, we know the Dutch was in. So when they saying that the Dutch, they say kidnapped 2 Indians. All right, so this dealing with when we was talking about this going to take me into something else. I need to keep that in mind right there, because that's going to show me that the people that was in Manhattan, the people that was buried under Wall Street, was already indigenous people there. All right, so that's my next video. All right, so boom, we going 1621, go to 1637. It's in the colony of Massachusetts, the Pequot, where Massachusetts is close to. Let's see. Hold up. All right, so hold up, not right here. Sorry about that. Bam, Nova Scotia right here, right? So when they came there, they didn't have the same people. They was warm with them, and they was sending them out to different places, right? Maine, Massachusetts is right here. All this shit right here is the same. All right, so if it's telling you right here that it says the Pequot Indians were the first slaves, but as they were not endured a yoke, they were sent to Bermuda in exchange for Negroes and hoped that they would later bear slavery more patiently. It says the first exchange of Indians for Negroes were made in 1637, and the first year of the Pequot War was doubtlessly kept up for many years. All right, so it tells you, it says, nonsense, whatever. All right, so we already read through a lot of that, but it's already telling you. Now they're telling you in this time right here, before they got this 1655, before they conquered it, they was already sending people because they was working their way in. We know.
Have found this book and read it to you guys. It's called Studies in History, Economics, and Public Law, edited by the Faculty of Political Science of Columbia University. And it says Indian slavery in colonial times within the present limits of the United States. Indian slavery by Almond Wheeler Lauber, PhD, New York Columbia University, 1913. Alright, so we're in chapter 2 of the book Indian Slavery in Colonial Times Within the Present Limits of the United States. And chapter 2 is Enslavement by the Spaniards. And it begins, in their attitude toward the Indians, the Spaniards simply applied the theory of their time regarding slavery. The taking of slaves was then considered part of any expedition of discovery or conquest. So it was a normal thing for the Spaniards to do. It was part of what they did when they so-called discovered something, right? Or when they went into conquest. The high authority of the church sanctioned the institution of slavery to the extent that the leading theologians had declared all barbarous and infidel nations who shut their ears to the truths of Christianity fair objects of rapine, captivity, and slavery. Again, so this is from the high authority of the church, which meant the Vatican. The papal bull they're talking about. If you didn't accept Christ or Jesus, you were a pagan, all right, or an infidel. You were declared a barbarous infidel if you didn't want to hear the truths of Christianity, all right. So because of that, you were open to be put in captivity and slavery, all right. Remember, this is a very scholarly article telling you how it really went down. So we're in this book. It's about Bartolomeo de las Casas, a famous friar that was in the time of discovery, actually traveled with Columbus in one of the voyages, I believe the second or the third. It says here, this is called Bartolomeo de las Casas, His Life, Apostolate, and Writings by Francis Augustus Magnut, written in 1909. So we begin here. They're talking about the colony that Columbus left behind in his first voyage, which he named Isabella in Hispaniola. And on his return on the second voyage, it says here, the first report on the state of the new colony of Isabella, which Columbus sent to Spain in January 1494, was in the form of an instruction to Antonio de Torres, receiver for the colony, whom Las Casas describes as a brother of the governor of the Infante Don Juan, a notable person, prudent and efficient for such a post. In this notable document occurs the first mention of slavery in the New World. The admiral directs Torres to inform the sovereigns that he has made slaves of some Indians captured in the Cannibal Islands and has sent them to Spain to have them taught Spanish in order that they may later serve as interpreters. All right, so they were sending American Indians, enslaving them, sending them to Europe, right, Spain. This is way before the transatlantic slave trade, right? And teaching them Spanish and all the other languages so they can be used as interpreters. They were bringing them back.
Now let's talk about this portrait right here. Now this is very deep, and I don't know why they would even paint a picture like this if it ain't true. Why would they even mess with the people's mind and play with this type of subject? Let's take a close look at who Christopher Columbus brought to the king and the queen. Made Israelite, Aboriginals, colored people, Negroes, look like they got afro. What else we have here? Most people would think these look like Africans, but now let's go and pay attention to detail. What do we see? Pineapples. And we know pineapples is an American fruit. The origin is in America. Now, why would they do this? Why would they put this much detail in this picture for it to be fake? Look at the exotic birds that you can find in the islands, Brazil, South America, Mexico. Look at the jewelry they're wearing. Look like Negroes to me. See, coconuts, and we all know coconuts for America. So, I don't know what to say now. It's like we be dropping opening closed case evidence, and y'all just being super denial. All I know is we dropping a lot of gems, and I see it's a lot of hate. Y'all should humble yourself and be students and learn. Stop trying to jump the gun. Just go for the pan boo-boos, the NIAs, all the above. Ain't no way we can skip over all this. Why would we skip over all this? Would you skip over this if this was your people? Come on, Let me know.
So the time that, in the time that that I was talking about, which is kind of an earlier colonial period, some of those names still would have been used, but when they get to the Caribbean is when they really get lost into just being called the Indians, because these are exported from the United States because of the rebellions and the revolts and sold into the Caribbean, where they practically disappear in some of the places that they were expelled to. And that's a different case from the Taino, who always lived there. This is where, this is where they were from. The ones who were expelled from the United States, parts of the coast down, and they gradually kind of disappear into the population.
There we go. It's a Pacific. Now check this out real quick. I'm gonna show you something. It's a Pacific causes of Bacon's rebellion. It say which were a Pacific cause of Bacon's rebellion. No, it say, I'm sorry. What were the Pacific causes of Bacon's rebellion? The Pacific causes of Bacon's rebellion at the low level were Bacon's rebellion, low prices of tobacco, Bacon's rebellion, high taxes which were believed to be unjust, land disputes over Aborigine increased, demands for farmers that Powhatan Indians should be removed from their treaty protected land. Now hold the fuck up. Hold the fuck up. Hold the fuck up. Demands for the farmers that Powhatan Indians should be removed from their treaty protected land. Okay? Now this is in 1604. Listen, that around that time had to be anywhere from, remember they came there. Remember they came to Roanoke. They came in the 1500s. Then they came back in the 1600s. All right, and where did they go? They met up with the Powhatans. This is when you get the Pocahontas story. So they said demands for farmers. Now these are European farmers. Now what did I show you? Look, a lot of King Powhatan. Okay, a lot of people believe that Chief Powhatan. Let me see something. No, I'm gonna go back. There was the other one. Because all my
now let's take a look at this. This is the trans-American slave trade, not the transatlantic, the trans-American slave trade. Look at all this movement coming from South America to the islands, up and down Northeast America. It's a lot of movement going on right here. Look at this. Look at all this. With all the Spanish wars going on. Every time there's a war, they enslave the losing people. And what you think they was doing? Sending them all around the world. Look at this. Look at this heavy traffic of slave trading, moving people. Look at that. And that's all on the equator what the Negroes would be. Look at that. That's crazy. Told y'all, ain't no stopping. Every day we're gonna drop more and more information. We the true Americans. Their mama know who her kids is. And she got us waking up. What I got to say about this now? Liz is a fucking shit. Yeah, ain't you trained? Your mama raised a lane. You my biggest hitter. 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 Oh, you my biggest hitter. Yeah, you my biggest hitter. You my biggest hitter. Okay. Oh. We still going? Yeah, it's hung up. Hey. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, we have one. Devil Africa. Hey, give him hell. Damn, give him hell. I'm about to give him hell.
Talking about 1619 and first so-called African slaves, when we know in its recorded history that the Spanish, right, the Spanish had settlements in the United States way before the English in 1607, 1619, whenever they brought their so-called slaves. And they have recorded that they also brought up so-called Negroes. All right, so who was first? All right, so we can throw that out the window. What you talking about 400 years? You see, this is all make-believe. All right. So the book is called The Spanish Settlements Within the Present Limits of the United States from 1513 to 1561 by Woodbury Lowery. It says with maps, and this is from 1911. All right, so we're in chapter 2 of this book, and it begins with continuing in the last chapter. It was talking about Ponce de Leon. If you guys don't know, one of the first Spanish colonizers. He actually, made it to Florida. One of the first so-called Spaniards to make it to Florida and discover it, supposedly, right? And some of the islands there, like Bimini and other islands near Florida. So it says here, sterile, as was the result of his expedition in the acquisition of gold and slaves. So he was trying to get gold and slaves because he had heard of the Fountain of Youth and gold and all these legends of Florida. All right, remember Ponce de Leon. All right, and so he wasn't able to because they kept fighting him. They kept him, even though they were getting slaughtered by their canyons and guns, they were still fighting them. They weren't able to, penetrate the land. So it says Ponce nonetheless determined to secure possession of his new discovery. Proceeding at once to Spain, he obtained through the influence of his old friend Pedro Núñez de Guzmán a second patent, dated September 27, 1514, much more explicit than the first, confirming his title. The patent empowered Ponce to settle the island of Bimini and the island of Florida, an island, that's what they thought it was, I guess, which he had discovered, but that he was first required to reduce the Caribs. He needs to reduce the Caribs before proceeding to make his settlement. The grant ran for 3 years from the date of embarkation, and he was further allowed to employ in the attempt at colonization the vessels and men he led against the Caribs. All right. As soon as there should be no further need of his presence, the patent authorized him to build dwelling houses, towns in the island, such as are built in these kingdoms, and even specified in part the details of their construction. It also renewed the command that no one should seek for slaves within his islands without his consent. So don't come looking for slaves here. Where? In Florida and Bimini? Alright, so who was there to enslave? Indians, right? So what were the Spanish doing? Enslaving Indians, not Africans. Why did he have to make a law? Why did he have to tell them, yo, don't come over here to enslave? Alright, I'm going to enslave these people. I'm going to make them work. Alright, because that's what they were doing at that time. Spanish were enslaving Indians, not Africans. And by the thousands at that time, thousands and thousands. Alright, so now look at what Ponce is going to say. Alright, and I've been telling you that, the Spanish had a type of similar system as indentured servitude. They called it encomienda. They had repartimiento, asientos. I mean, they had so many things, but it was just another form of service.
Is that it?
Who are the Caribs?
They're from South America, right? Or like the Guyanas.
Yeah. Well, who are they?
I'm not sure.
You have to do your history, friend.
Yeah.
Where do you think the black people here come from?
I'm not sure. It's either like slave ship or they came from Africa, right? What do you?
We've never been African.
Never.
We've never been African.
They don't really say on.
We're not really African. We are the Caribs.
Right.
We are the Caribs. Our ancestors are the Caribs. We man this. We control this. We inhabited this.
Yeah.
The sea was named for us, the Caribbean. We are the Caribs. The Africans came after. They came around the Cape Horn.
All right, they had servants. The Indians had servants, an encomienda system, right? They called it. Now he says Ponce says, should require of the caciques and Indians in said islands, in the best manner that they could be made to understand that was said to them, in conformity with a requisition which had been drawn up by many learned men, that they should come to the knowledge of our Catholic faith, to obey and serve as they are bounden. And you shall have written down by 2 or 3 scriveners, if they obey, and before as many witnesses and trustworthy persons as shall be there, that it may serve as our justification. And if after the above procedure they seek not to obey the contents of said requisition, in such case you may make war upon them and enslave them. But if they obey, you shall treat them as best you can, and shall seek in every possible way that they be converted to our holy Catholic faith. And if after having once rendered obedience to said requisition, again in Spanish it's called requerimiento. Now they're talking about, and I mentioned this in the other videos, that when the Spanish got there, Columbus and all of them, they had this kind of, they had this document, this legal document they read out. It was called their requerimiento, that they read out to the Indians in their language, right? So they would say, you have to accept, the Catholic Church, you have to accept Jesus and the kingdom and serve the Queen and King, and you have to do it, or else we will enslave you and take all your land and your things and everything. And the Indians didn't know. So it was like a game they were playing with them, right? So they can say, oh, well, we told them at least, and they chose war, or like it's saying here, right? So if they disobey, what happens is we should enslave them, right? That's what it says here, right? So this is the requisition or requerimiento. It's called in Spanish. Look it up. They shall rebel. I command that you shall again cause them to comply with the said requisition before making war upon them or doing them any harm or damage. I mean, so eventually Ponce was able to conquer the Caribs and, settle in this island, other islands around there in Florida. The whole area they were calling Florida. Even the islands, Bimini and Guadalupe and all that, they were all that calling all Florida. It seems in a lot of these records. All right, so, a lot of the Spaniards were doing the same. So there's other accounts. It says here in February of the following year, 1517, Francisco Hernandez de Córdoba sailed from Havana with 3 ships and 110 men. Among them were some noblemen who had come to Cuba but a few months before, and a priest to say mass for them and administer the sacraments. Diego Velázquez, at that time governor of Cuba, had sold the adventurers one of the ships on the condition that it should be paid for in slaves, which were to be secured by making war upon the Indians in the Lucayan Islands, all right, not Africans. These, once again, the Spaniards were enslaving or putting Indians into servitude, not Africans. All right, so I just wanted to show you some examples what they were doing. There's a lot of accounts of different Spaniards going on different voyages or expeditions of discovery, right? They were really basically looking for slaves and gold and how to exploit whoever they found in whatever land or country they landed in America. All right, so now there is one dude that is very important to what I was saying earlier, how they teach us that the first so-called Negroes came in 1619. That was by the English, but that is so wrong. All right, this is a person you probably never heard of in your life. It's a Spaniard, one of those Spaniards. All right, his name was Lucas Vasquez de Leon. So Leon. All right, so it says here, there was living in Hispaniola a certain Lucas Vasquez de Leon of Toledo, who had come there with Ovando, from whom he received the appointment of alcalde mayor or mayor, right? Mayor of La Concepcion and other towns. He had now become one of the auditors of the island, and he was said to be a man of considerable intelligence, well educated and virtuous, according to the standard of the times, though unlearned in the arts of war, never having done a corslet or borne a sword to earn his wages therewith, says Oviedo, who was personally acquainted with him. He was very rich, having received from Ovando 400 Indians in repartimientos in payment of his salary, as was that time the custom. All right, so what are they talking about? Repartimiento. So the Spaniards, when they took over, settlements, Indian settlements, and they put them and grouped them wherever they had their missions or whatever, then they will distribute them. So repartir in Spanish is to distribute. So repartimiento is like a distribution of the Indians. So he got 400. That's a lot. Because I have like in my country, this happened in 1569 in Costa Rica, where they put all the Indians in missions because we were living all spread out through the whole country. So they gathered us up and put us in different missions. Once they had us in the missions, they did their repartimientos. And I have a book with the list, the numbers they distributed to each Spaniard or colonist, right? And again, they call it repartimiento, and then it becomes an encomienda. So now you had an indentured servant, right? So this guy had, he got lucky. He got 400 Indians, right? That's a lot of servants, right?
The truth will always reveal itself.
Okay, a lot of people was talking about those pictures of the slaves with the chains and the things around their necks and all that stuff. Let me tell you, hip you to a little story. Those pictures that you've seen of our ancestors, those were prisoners of war. You understand me? All the ones that you've seen that were shackled or so-called shackled or had devices around their necks or was whipped, and you've seen that, those were prisoners of war. You can believe that. I done told you I will bring out all the books and put them in your faces now. And I can still do that one too. So once I finish with the one that I got going on now, I'm going to put you in a corner in the way you can't get out.
Could you talk about how Europeans went about capturing Native Americans?
Well, it's not a happy thing, but it illustrates one of the kinds of great lessons that we as human beings have to learn. And that lesson is to be very astute and not allow ourselves to be used against our brothers and sisters. Not allow ourselves to be dupes and to be used in brutal ways against other human beings. Okay, often we don't simply have the information, and the Spaniards were often very direct and very brutal. They just went in and captured thousands of people and rounded them up and took them to market. But in other cases, the colonialists were much more clever. For example, the Portuguese conquered Brazil basically by Portuguese men intermarrying with native people, particularly powerful tribes living along the coast, powerful chieftains. And then, of course, Native Americans value their families very much. Kinship is extremely important. And so without realizing it, now they've got a new member of the family. He doesn't have the same motives that they have, but there are kinship obligations by means of which this Portuguese guy gradually takes advantage of existing enmities that may exist between Indian groups, maybe some old hostilities, and uses then his relatives against other Indian groups. And pretty soon rewards them with guns and with other weapons and goods for capturing other human beings. And so it starts out small, but as time goes by, it becomes tremendously big operations. In southern Brazil, for example, in the 17th century, there's a period of time in which at least 200,000 or 300,000 Indian people from Spanish Jesuit missions in the Paraguay area are raided and carried off to the coast as slaves, largely by bands of people who are mixed Indian and Portuguese or Indian, but led by mixed blood or Portuguese chieftains who are the founders of Sao Paulo, or Paulistas, they're called in southern Brazil. Other colonialists, example in South Carolina, the English are very astute to also take advantage of existing animosities. And they get some of the tribes to provide a lot of the slaves, and by that mean they acquire, for example, lots of Choctaw slaves from Mississippi. Choctaws are among the largest group that are enslaved and are sold through South Carolina to the West Indies and to New England and held in South Carolina. There are also tribes even west of the Mississippi that get raided and are brought in as slaves. Florida is cleaned out. Virtually all the Indians that remained in Florida after the Spanish period are cleaned out by the English and sold as slaves in South Carolina.
You say cleaned out?
Yeah, virtually depopulated. Florida is virtually depopulated of its native population. The Indian people who later live in Florida are primarily people moving south to get away from the whites. Seminoles, for example. They moved south from what is now Alabama and Georgia. But the native inhabitants, by and large, are enslaved. They're Christians, they have Spanish surnames, but they're brought north here to South Carolina and become part of the slave population.
Europe had decimated their woods. And one of the big reasons they came here was our gigantic trees. They built ships and houses and cathedrals and whatever. And we were in the way. So got to get these people out of the way, and we can take their resources and so enslave them, ship them out, whatever it takes so you can get the resources. This country's been a capital investment since day one.
So I know he has to know the difference. You know what I'm saying? Because like I said, even when they talking about that Negroes from Angola shit, they would the Portuguese was already taking Negroes from fucking Brazil over to the Iberian Peninsula, or what we consider to be Spain and Portugal, right? Now look, it says, look, check it out. It said, all right, it's American ancestors. It said the manner in which America and the part Americans were sometimes classified as mulatto and people of color. It said from England to South Carolina in the Spanish empires are explored elsewhere. The purpose here is to illustrate the term Negro has always been applied to the people of American descendants. Okay, which we always been talking about. The possibility that Native Americans were quite commonly called Negro is very much supported by Portuguese usage. During the colonial period, Brazil Indians were repeatedly referred to as Negroes or Negro de Terra. Now, hold up. The Brazil Indians was called Negroes, but yet this lady on this panel is sitting there acting like it wasn't. What do we assume the word Negro? Niggas is acting naively to what the word Negro means. No one is going into like, hold up. Everybody's not called the Negro. There's only one person called the Negro. They don't call everybody no Negro. So let's stop acting like they use that term and everybody's applied to that. So if you telling me that they thought that the people here resemble or was Negroes, and we think Negro is a color, or we remember, I think Negro is a term and it's dealing with a term of bondage, but other people think Negro is other people think the word Negro is a group of race of people. When no, they get said that the Portuguese applied that term to the people here in America. And I said during colonial period, Brazil Indians were repeatedly referred to as Negro or as Negro de Terra, Negro of the land. A great number of these examples from the 16th and later century are cited in George Frederick in his analysis of the Portuguese sources. Now they go one of your source right there, because everybody always asks for that source right there. They go the source right there, and they go the person who actually says it. So George, just to get the indefinite source, because people don't believe it, and even when they do tell you that they was calling them Negroes, niggas want to get stupid. Niggas want to act like they don't know who they referring to. Who the only people they call Negro? They don't call everybody no Negro. Okay, so let's stop that. Nowadays, everybody like my nigga and all that, but we know who they call the Negro.
222 out of 239 years since 1776. The U.S. has only been at peace for 21 years total since its conception, or birth. It birthed itself. That's why we got maritime laws and everything else ruling this country.
Founding fathers. We want to take it back to the founding fathers. Alex Jones, founding fathers. William Mount, founding fathers. All they can do is take it back to the founding fathers. With the documentation all over to show that the founding fathers were invading. Can nobody argue that you've been invaded on? Can nobody argue that you are a prisoner of war? And what comes with being a prisoner of war?
Aren't you right? Come on, man. In 2011, Daniels wrote, "Below, I have reproduced a year-by-year timeline of America's wars, which reveals something quite interesting. Since the United States was founded in 1776, she has been at war during 214 out of her 235 calendar years of existence. In other words, there were only 21 calendar years in which the United States did not wage any wars. I wonder why. To put this in perspective, pick any year since 1776, and there is about a 91% chance that America was involved in some war during that calendar year.
Body bag.
Why is that important? That's where the president comes in. Come on, walk with me. No U.S. president truly qualifies as a peacetime president. Let me read that one more time. No United States president truly qualifies as a peacetime president. No United States president truly qualifies as a peacetime president. What does that mean? Instead, all U.S. presidents can technically be considered war presidents. What? War? What does that mean? The U.S. has never gone a decade without war.
Against who?
The only time the U.S. went 5 years without war was 1935 through 1940, was during the isolationist period of the Great Depression. Here's a graphic depiction of United States wars. Calendar years the U.S. has been at war since 1776. And here's the year-by-year timeline of America's major wars. Year-by-year timeline of America's major wars, 1776 to 2011. And we're still in war today.
Pay attention.
1776, American Revolutionary War. Chickamauga Wars. Second Cherokee War. Pennamite Yankee War. Y'all figuring this out yet? Don't worry about it. We're going to get there. American Revolutionary War, Chickamauga War, Second Cherokee War, Pennamite Yankee War, 78 American Revolutionary War, 79 American Revolutionary War, 80 American Revolutionary War, 81 American Revolutionary War, 82 American Revolutionary War. Listen, they've been at war with your ass the whole time.
Activate. Activate. This is a real serious situation we have here. When you find out that the corporation or the London company or the Plymouth company, one, you think you're a citizen of a corporation that's owned by a corporation. So the London company owns the corporation. So you're a citizen of a corporation owned by a corporation. Guys, you gotta give these guys a fucking applause, man. I mean, they really did it. Oh, the sorcery. Oh, I can't stomach the genius. The evil genius. The twistedness. But now we can just look at it for what it is, and no one can deny it. I mean, they've been at war with you since the beginning, so that means they must be at war with you in the end. Can I back it up one time? For your mind, man. Let's get it. Let us find the true king. Real talk, man. Now you see already, we're 16 minutes in. This belongs in the Drop Hall of Fame. And look how he does his dismount. He's going to Nadia Comaneci this thing. Oh, man, I can't be prouder of this brother. On real spill, real time. Right up on your face bone. Take it like that. And don't look back.
1776. And here's the year-by-year timeline of America's major wars. Year-by-year timeline of America's major wars, 1776 to 2011. And we're still in war today. 1776, American Revolutionary War, Chickamauga Wars, Chickamauga Wars, Second Cherokee War, Pennamite Yankee War, They don't figure this out yet. Don't worry about it. We're going to get there. American Revolutionary War.
Then we just read the annals of the Cockchaquels, the Chickamauga. Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, Anasazis. Every time you see this is all Negro, 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 except you're not Negro, right? They're giving you titles, man. I mean, you never heard this stuff before. This might be closer to what you actually might be. You're getting warmer. Get off the Negro. Check that box, American Indian. Check other, check something, but don't check black, don't check African American. You just giving it all up. Then you're saying you're not the people that they were fighting, when in reality you are. Let go.
War, Chickamauga War, Second Cherokee War, Pennamite Yankee War, 78 American Revolutionary War, 79 American Revolutionary War, 80 American Revolutionary War,
Negro.
81 American Revolutionary War,
Negro.
82 American Revolutionary War.
Negro.
Listen, they've been at war with your ass the whole time. I want you to understand this. Look at what the fuck I'm showing you, people. Please focus. Focus. Since 1776, they have been at war with you, right? The war never ended. It never ended. They got clever. They got clever and started changing names. If I change the name and I take their history from them, they won't realize that I'm at war with them. They won't never figure this shit out.
Damn.
Right?
Damn.
They never stop being at war with you.
Damn.
Now let's get to the goodies.
Come on.
Now this is the Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war.
Yeah.
75. UNTS 135 is...
Motherfucker, if y'all don't fucking look this shit up, if you don't do that, man, for your sake, for your children's sake, if you just sit back and just listen to this shit like you're watching some video, if you don't do some action, man, and look this up, shame on you. Shame, I say.
Enforced October 21st, 1950. Let's get an understanding of what's going on here. Part 1, General Provisions. Article 1. The high contracting parties undertake to respect and to ensure respect for the present convention in all circumstances. Article 2. In addition to the provisions which shall be implemented in peacetime. Let's go back.
Come on. Gotta get this right for you.
Now, let's see. The last time there was peacetime, it was 1935 to 1940. Okay?
All right.
Now, we are not in any peacetime. We are still at war.
True.
Okay?
True.
This country's still at war.
Okay.
All right, so in addition to the provisions which shall be implemented in peacetime, the present convention shall, and so you know what convention is.
Oh, it's going to the
early 15th century, a formal agreement.
Let's go.
It's a formal agreement.
Come on.
In addition to the provisions which shall be implemented in peacetime, we are not in peacetime. The present agreement shall apply to all all cases of declared war or of any other armed conflict which may arise between two or more of the high contracting parties. Right. Now, the contracting parties are the people involved in the contract, and people involved in the contract, the parties involved in the contract. Even if the state of war is not recognized by one of them. Now, guess what? You're still at war, right? But you don't recognize it. Now, let's go back.
Oh, shit. Golly.
Since 1776, you've been at war with them. They came over, dumb diverses. All right? I'm not going to do the dumb diverses again. You should already know it. Barbary. What's Barbary? We know they're talking about a Saracen. What's a Saracen? An Afro-Asian. Okay? Look at this. All right? U.S. occupied Spanish-held West Florida. Well, they're still fighting in 1810 with the people in Florida, right? Which was held by the Spanish.
Damn.
Tecumseh's War, War of 1812, Seminole Wars.
Oh,
who were they fighting?
Oh.
Who were they fighting? They came here to conquer who? Saracens. And pagans. So, if you're a pagan, which means you're not a Saracen, which means you're not Afro-Asian, you're just some other type of person in this land at the time, they've been at war with the Afro-Asian and you the other, okay? Since they got here, okay? Since they got here, they've been at war with you. But they're recognizing all the wars, right? Starting in 1776. But the war started with the dumb diverses. I'm not going to backtrack. You saw that already. Now let's go back. So now at this point, because you have been separated from your history, who you are, and you don't know what any of this means, now you need to understand, if you're an African American, you're not a Saracen. If you're a black person, you're not a Saracen. If you're a Negro, you're not a Saracen. Now let's go back to the dumb diverses, okay? Starting at the top. Let me blow this up for you guys. Dum Diversus is a papal bull issued on the 18th of June in 1452 by Pope Nicholas. It authorized Afonso of Portugal to conquer Saracens and pagans and consign them to perpetual servitude.
Forever.
We know Saracens is Afro-Asian, and we know pagans is anybody else caught in the land with the Saracens, right? Now, let's back up to the Columbus page again. Columbus, Nina Pinta, and Santa Maria were driven across the Atlantic by the same ill winds that from 1095 to 1272 launched 9 European crusades to capture the people of the covenant in Jerusalem. Defeated and humiliated the invaders, suffered staggering human losses, left royal treasuries depleted, and convinced Christian leaders to only pay lip service.
Wow.
Right? To go back and do this shit again.
Wow.
Listen, the covenant people in Jerusalem.
Wow.
They are called Saracens, and then the others, which are pagans, put them in perpetual servitude. Let's go back. All right, so now that you're an African American, you're a black, and you're a Negro, you have no connection to your heritage.
Come on, bro.
Now, transgender comes into play. Transgender comes into play at this point, right? Move forward into your heritage, your stock, your race, your group. Go into it through transgenderism, okay? Now, you're not African, you're not black, and you're not a Negro. So, even if the state of war is not recognized by one of the parties, now you're one of the parties that doesn't recognize you're still in a fucking war. Right. Well, now you do. Now you know. The convention shall also apply to all cases of partial or total occupation of the territory. Wait a minute. The agreement shall also apply to all cases of partial or total occupation of the territory. So where they're partially there ruling your ass, or where they're fully in abundance running your ass, it applies, of the territory of a high contracting party. Well, we know over here in North America at the top, they talking about us. Even if the said occupation meets with no armed resistance. Well, listen.
Wow.
The occupation, all right, do I got that pulled up?
Oh.
Let's see.
Etymology.
Occupation, early 14th century, fact of holding or possessing. All right.
Etymology.
Occupy, to take possession of. Resistance, make a stand against or oppose. To oppose your oppressors or occupiers. Now guess what? Even if the occupier is met with no armed resistance, well, you're not armed or attacking your oppressor in their occupation of your land. Although one of the powers in conflict may not be a party to the present convention or agreement, may not be a party to the present agreement, one of the powers, so somebody else in power in this conflict may not be a party to the present agreement, right? So somebody else can be here and not be a party to that agreement, but there be a power over top of you. The powers who are parties thereto shall remain bound by it in their mutual relations. They shall furthermore be bound by the convention in relation to the said power, if the latter accepts and applies the provisions thereof. So if you join in with the people that occupy this land, you become connected to that agreement to do the same thing they're doing to the people that they're occupying and oppressing. Article 3. In the case of armed conflict, not of an international character occurring in the territory of one of the high contracting parties, each party to the conflict shall be bound to apply as a minimum the following provisions, right? So now...
Fine, right? Look, it says, listen to this. It say, why are Aztec American Indians on slave posters? Look, it said, why are Aztec American Indians on Negro slave posters, right? Now listen to this shit, right? It says, why are Aztec American Indians on Negro slave posters? The native people of America on the pictures and posters because the first world slaves was Native American. The first poster is not about Native American. They are clearly said to be Africans are depicted. It's saying, but it seldomly told the story of American slavery that Native American people are the very large part of early slave trade in some Southeast countries up to, remember, we're from the Southeast. The Southeast is Virginia, all that. Virginia through Florida and Florida through Louisiana and Mississippi and all that, right? It's just ironically that they mention the Southeast. Listen, it say in some of the Southeast colonies up through the end of the 18th century, Native Americans at times outnumbered those of African descendants. From 1670 to 1720, more Indians were shipped than people was born in. Now, I read that on numerous occasions, right? Let me see something else. Negro and blacks to include persons of Native American ancestry. Now it say in Angola, North America, right? Look, it say in Angola, right? It's quotation North America, right? So look, it say in 1854, the California State Supreme Court sought to bar all non-Caucasians from equal citizenship and civil rights. The court stated that the word black may include all Negroes, but the term Negro does not all include blacks. It said we are part of opinion that the word white and Negro, mulatto, black person, whenever they occurred in the Constitution, must be taken out of generic sense. The word black person in the 14th section must be taken as contradistinction from whites and necessarily include all races other than Caucasians. All right, so as convoluted as the quote may be, it tends to express a strong tendency in the history of the United States towards creating two broad classes of people, white and non-white citizens. The non-citizens are semi-citizens. The tendencies to create the two-caste societies often clash with realities of territory, which include many different types of people of color, it's saying, and different degrees of intermixing European American, they can say African, but I don't agree with that, and Asian. Native American people, whether unmixed ancestry or mixed with other stocks, were at time affected by tendency to create purity, white, black social system, especially when living away from the reservation and our ancestry homeland. In the British slave colonies of North America along the Atlantic coast, many persons of American ancestry were at times classified black, Negro, and mulatto, or people of color. It said, and these terms were, of course, used for people of African ancestry. Now they saying that, but remember, the reader is, and I know this guy who reading this shit. Because he's the one telling you that the 1619 story is false. So I know he has to know the difference. You know what I'm saying? Because like I said, even when they talking about that Negroes from Angola shit, they were the Portuguese was already taking Negroes from fucking Brazil over to the Iberian Peninsula, or what we consider to be Spain and Portugal, right? Now look, it says, look, check it out. It says, all right, it's American ancestors. It said the manner in what does it say? The 10th of April, 1606 was full of fate in the destinies. Destiny. Yeah. Of the Western continent. On that day, King James I issued two great patents directed to men of his kingdom. So King James I, April 10th, 1606, issues direct patents directed to men of his kingdom, authorizing them to possess and colonize all that portion of North America lying between the 34th and 35th parallels of latitude. The immense tract thus embraced extended from the mouth of Cape Fear River to Passamaquoddy Bay, and westward to the Pacific Ocean. The first patent was granted to an association of nobles, gentlemen, and merchants residing at London and called the London Company, while the second instrument was issued to a similar body which had been organized at Plymouth in southwestern England and which bore the name Plymouth Company. To the former corporation was assigned all the region between the 34th and 38th degrees of latitude, and to the latter the tract extending from the 41st to the 45th degree. The narrow belt of these 3 degrees lying between the 38th and 41st parallels was to be equally open to the colonies of either company. So these are companies, corporations. This is the second world. You're the first world. This is what they're doing to the first world. They're putting corporations on you. Plymouth Company, London Company. The narrow belt of the 3 degrees line between the 38th and 41st parallels was to be equally open to the colonies of either company, but no settlement of one party was to be made within less than 100 miles of the nearest settlement of the other. See how they were mapping out your land? You see why the government still got 770 million acres of your land in a trust right now? You see why the 4 corners are yours, why everything is yours? This is the proof. The nature and extent of these grants will be fully understood from our examination of the accompanying map. Only the London Company was successful under its charter in planting an American colony. So the London Company is the one that planted the American colony. The company is the London Company. The corporation is the London Company. The American colony is owned by the London Company. And this is their territory. King James I
before he wrote your 1611 or put together or had it put together 1611, in 1603, what did he do? What did the king do? What did King James do in 1603? What did he do? He came here in 1603, and then what did he do? The 10th of April, 1606 was full of fate in the destinies of the Western continent on that day. Listen up. Here's the baby. Let's get it out the bathwater. On that day, King James I issued 2 great patents directed to men of his kingdom, Edomites, Hebrew Edomites, authorizing them to possess and colonize all that portion of North America lying between the 34th and 35th parallels of latitude. The immense tract thus embraced extended from the mouth of Cape Fear River to Passamaquoddy Bay and west of the Pacific Ocean. King James I issued these patents, and it authorized these mercenaries to possess and colonize, to possess and colonize, to possess and to colonize. What did we just kick with the dumb diverses in 1452 Papa Bull? This was the Vatican, the Pope Nicholas V, issuing his authority to the kings of Spain and Portugal. But then now you got this authority also hitting on King James, and King James, with that authority from the dumb diverses, right, then extends his authority and issues 2 great patents in 1606 directed to the men of his kingdom, authorizing them to possess and colonize all that portion of North America. And you know the rest. That's the drop. Yeah, King James. Yeah, King James. Yeah, documentation. King James was here. Who was here? Who was here? Right up on you. So when you get the understanding of the palaces that we built for them on our land, this is the corporation, the London Company, the Plymouth Company. How can you be a citizen of a corporation? How can you rock with a 1611 version written after his voyage in 1603 and after the 2 great patents issued to colonize and possess you in 1606? Rock with your commandments, stay up, suit up, and choose
this vessel or whatever. But the Dutch didn't have Virginia, so the Dutch could not bring nobody into Virginia. Because remember, what did the English do to the Dutch when they was in New York? Kick them out. So you think the Dutch came back fucking with the English again? No. It says 1619, some 20 Negroes were brought to Virginia. At least 11 had Spanish or probably Spanish characters. Later, they was joined by Negroes, mulattoes with names such as Antonio, several John Pedro. These Spanish-derived servants could have well been part of American ancestry. However, there is no evidence except that they was largely secure from a captured Spanish vessel. Now these stupid motherfuckers will automatically think, oh, they was captured. The Spanish was all in the Caribbean, so it was captured from a Spanish vessel. So where did they go to get these people from? Did they get them in the middle of the ocean, or did they get them off of the coast? So where was they going? So the Spanish was coming here with them, or was the Spanish trying to go somewhere with them? You understand? You get it? That's you understand? Let me see something. It said in 1670, the population of Virginia colony was said to be 40,000, including 2,000 black slaves. Evidence indicates that there could not have been many Africans there, and also that there were a great many of American slaves or servants. Thus, the total of blacks must have included a great many Americans. Okay, in 1698, 3 fugitives, Negroes, were reported in North Carolina, of whom were American. Similarly, a list of Negroes imported into Virginia, 1710, 1718, by sea include at least 60 names, Indians, most likely from Carolina. The list of Negroes brought into New York in 1715, 1736 include many slaves, probably or stated American ancestry of Campeche, Jamaica, Honduras, and the Carolinas and Virginia. Okay, so I don't know what you think about that so far, Chief.
Well, they get said in 1708 they enslaved. He estimate that 10
10,000 to 12,000 Florida Indians have been enslaved. This is 1708, my dude. So in 1708, they enslaved 10 to 12 million Indians in Florida? What? Really? And you want me to believe the story about these 20 so-called Africans that came here, that niggas is obviously slow? You understand what I'm saying? Niggas is obviously slow, because even it says, look, an example from the West Indies is especially illuminating. In 1764, William Young was sent to St. Vincent as a part of the British occupation of that land. Living in St. Vincent were about 3,000 black Caribs or free Negroes, or say about 100 red Caribs or Indians. It's saying and 4,000 Frenchmen. It's saying and their slaves. According to Young, the British found it difficult to control the Caribs, and wars were fought with them in 1771 through 1772, and during 1795 and 1796. During the later crisis, Young wrote an extremely anti-Carib tract designed to prove that the Caribs should be removed. They should be removed from St. Vincent. They were eventually defeated, and some 5,000 were shipped to an island near the coast of Honduras. So they were shipping people from the Caribbean to Honduras. And like we said, we already find proof of that, because that is something like in a sense, that's what we heard about the lady Titubia, that they sent, that the original people, I believe, that was in Barbados. Some of them was sent to, not Honduras, but Guyana. You know what I'm saying? And then they was brought back. I believe that they made some type of treaty to bring the people back. But when they went there, this is where they get the lady Titubia. But nonetheless, they say Young was anxious to prove that the so-called black Cribs were not true Aborigines, but in fact, Negro colonists, free Negroes, or Negro usurpers. This was important to him because he wanted to show that he had no bona fide land right to Aborigine title. For our purpose, the interesting point admitted by Young is that the so-called black or Negroes were occasionally of tawny or mixed complexion, because the American ancestry and their customs, personal names, and language were those of native Caribs. Still further, Young admits that they have repeatedly intermarriage with American women. He constantly referred to them as Negroes nonetheless. See? It says Young also relied a great deal on hearsay information about the black Caribs has originated. It's saying which is without the foundation for analysis here. The important part is this, that the people thoroughly,
All right. The Providence Island Colony was established in 1631 by English Puritans on what is now the Colombian department of Isla de Providencia, about 200 kilometers east of the coast of Nicaragua. Although intended to be a model Puritan colony, it also functioned as a base for privateers operating against Spanish ships and settlements in the region. Alright, so these privateers, if you start doing the research, they turn out to be pirates. They call them privateers, but they were pirates working for the English government or king and queen to basically pirate Spanish ships, like attack Spanish ships, just like the Pirate of the Caribbean movie, and take all their goods. That includes human cargo, unfortunately, and that was Native Americans, as we're going to see later on. The Spanish ships was taking numerous, Spanish and Portuguese, numerous Native American people from all over South America, Newfoundland, up in North America, in Canada, Nova Scotia, from South Carolina. They had ports in Cartagena in Colombia. They had ports in Florida and Hispaniola and Jamaica, Bermuda. And so they were, basically raiding these ships and taking their slaves. So sometimes it happened the opposite way. As we see in here, it says, in 1641, the Spanish overran and destroyed the colony. So in 1641, the Spanish arrived and attacked. And we read earlier that the Negroes that arrived in Mosquito Coast, or the Mosquito people, were from basically slaves that ran away from Providence Island. And we see why now, because the Spanish attacked. So who were these slaves that the Puritans had? Who were these Negroes that the Puritans had? These Pilgrims. These are the same people. 1620s when the Pilgrims arrived in Massachusetts. This was established in 1631. and through the Providence Island Company, which you'll see is the same as the Pilgrims and the Massachusetts Bay Company. So let's see who they had actually, these Providence Island Colony, who they had as slaves. And from the book Providence Island, 1630 to 1641, the other Puritan Colony by Karen Cooperman. We're gonna get this excerpt right here. It says the Spanish found Providence Island well provided with arms and ammunition, including 60 pieces of heavy artillery and a great deal of equipment stockpiled for the attempt to colonize the Mosquito Coast. The island was inhabited by 381 slaves who were sold at Cartagena and Portobello by order of the king and about 350 English settlers, including some formerly on San Andreas and elsewhere who had consolidated on Providence Island after the 1640 attack. So just to stop right there real quick, it says basically this is the account of the Spanish arriving that day of attacking Providence Island, the Puritans, right? And it says that they were heavily armed and that they actually were planning to go colonize the Mosquito Coast. These Puritans, they were going to the Mosquito Coast probably already back and forth, right? And it says that the slaves or the people that they had there were sold in Cartagena, Colombia. So they grabbed some of the Puritan slaves and sold them in Cartagena and Colombia after that. It says that continues, says the number of slaves was much lower than the Spanish expected. They learned that the English, fearful of rebellion, had dispersed many of their slaves to St. Christopher's and Bermuda. So they had sent many of their slaves to other islands, the Puritans, right? Now they were bringing these slaves from Massachusetts. I'm going to show you. Watch. 18th century accounts of the Mosquito Coast hold that the ship manned by the rebellion slaves was wrecked south of Cape Gracias a Dios in 1641. Again, that was in Honduras, and that's where the so-called slaves or so-called Africans were shipwrecked, right, in 1641, and they were from Providence Island, Puritan slaves that they had escaped. It says these memoirs differ on the escapees' origin. So they still really don't know the origin, right? The theory is that they were fleeing from Providence Island as it fell to the Spanish. All accounts agreed that the newcomers melded into the native population. Alright, so as you can see, more correlation that they were coming from Providence Island after the Spanish had invaded and attacked the Puritans. So it was the slaves of the Puritans who fled. Alright.
We see it. Let me see something. All right, I'm gonna read something a little bit. So it say what the English meant by the term Negro when they first begin to use it is not clear. We know why it's not clear, because that is not their word. They don't call people Negroes. They was only calling them that because the English took over the Spanish colonies in the Caribbean, and as a result to that, they already applied it. Didn't they just tell you that the Spanish and the Portuguese applied that to the people in the Caribbean? You understand what I'm saying? Like I said, man, you know, you got a lot of these niggas, man. A lot of these Pan-Africans, that's some stupid motherfuckers, man. Because one minute you'll sit here and ask me and say, well, the white man, look, let's stop playing that white man shit. Let's just start playing the game of, like, why are scholars going against historical information? Why would someone say that it was already people here? Why would they tell you that the Indians was enslaved, which most people ain't even talking about, and they try to make it seem like it's such a small number, like these people went over there and brought so many Africans here, when they don't have any African colonies. Okay, all of the colonies was mainly either the Portuguese, the French, or in some cases the Spanish. The only colonies that the British had in Africa was later Sierra Leone, either Sierra Leone or Liberia, one of the two. And we went over that the last time, right? So look. So what they say, it say what the English meant by the term Negro when they begin to use it is not clear because they don't understand. The person writing this article don't understand that the English don't even use the term. They only got it from the Spanish. That's it. The Spanish kept saying I'm Negro, or they call me Negro, or even the people who was on ship was saying that they was calling us Negro, or the people who they took the ship from was telling them these are Negroes. Okay. They say that. It say what the English meant by the term Negro when they first began to use it is not clear. Certain it was not then synonymous with slaves. It's saying as great many persons of classified were free. It's saying both in England and in Virginia. It's saying did it mean an African, a black person, or a dark-skinned individual? Today the term is not widely employed in Britain. It's saying although the word black is used to refer a person of various skins of color. It's saying from South Asia, Middle East, and West Indian. It's saying and Africa. It's saying most Native Americans, if living in Britain today, would be regarded as being black, especially if their ancestry was unknown. So look, so they would classify you and say, well, look, he looked black, so he might be black. But another nigga saying, no, I'm an Indian. So he's, oh, you're an Indian. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Do you understand what the fuck I just read? Let me read it again. Saying, let me go back. Today, the term is not widely employed in Britain because they never used the term. They called us black, but understand this too. You don't see no black on no documentation. You don't see black on no documentation here. Only thing you honestly see is colored. Either colored, Indian, or Negro. That's all you see. They was using this term black as another term, according to what I believe, okay? But it tells you right here. It tells you right here. The English, they don't even know what the fuck the English meant by the term, because the English ain't know. The English thought the people was Negro. That's why when people automatically see, well, look, they bringing people from the Caribbean. They classify them as Negroes. Them gotta be Africans, because only Africans look like Negroes, according to these idiots. But they're telling you that they're calling Negroes. What's the name? Now look, let me get into it. Let's read a little bit more.